it is time to fasten your seatbelts and prepare for a massive multi-car collision because Forza Motorsport has been out for about a week and this is going to be a complicated one. My excitement for this game kind of dropped as we got close to its release date, and I wasn't really bothered by the fact that I played the game a few days after its release. My first impressions of this game was very negative, and from what I experienced within the first hour or so, I was ready to just quit and say fuck it. But my opinion has changed since then, and there's a lot to talk about here. Forza Motorsport is using this new car PG system, kind of like a RPG system for your car, which is you buy a car, earn experience points, which you then use to purchase performance and cosmetic upgrades as you stick with your car and level it up, kind of like your very own Pokemon. Here is why this feature is pretty dumb and a bit wasted. They emphasize this idea of keeping your car so you can build it into its ultimate racing beast. So why are we then forced to buy a new car whenever we start a new championship, cup, or series? Shouldn't I be allowed to keep and race my car for as long as I want until I decide to buy one of the over 500 available cars and then build that up? I'm personally a fan of the Ford Mustang, so it was no surprise that I chose the Mustang for my first car within the first Builders Cup series. However, my excitement shrunk even lower because when I chose to start with that ugly block of cheddar cheese sack of shit Mustang, my issues kind of grew more and more within that first hour or so. Now, my issues are not because I suck at racing simulators or suck at the game in general. There are some clear issues with the game, such as some settings, some mechanics and features that are offered within the game. Now, I choose to play with manual transmission with clutch and very minimum assist, primarily using the brake line assist so I know when to brake for the turns. And with that ugly block of cheddar cheese sack of shit Mustang, it took me about an hour or more to finish the first race in the Builders Cup. The very first race in the game after the tutorial took me over an hour to finish. I eventually found out that when I personalized my settings, it disabled my stability and traction control. And when I re-enabled them, the settings disabled my brake line assist indicator. So the settings was my first issue with this game. Now, before each race, the game forces you to do a practice run so you can try to earn some more experience for your car. But again, there's really no point in this car PG system when you're still forced to buy a new car every time you start a new championship. It also makes no sense to force us into a practice race when we can then pause the game and quit the practice just to jump right into the race. The practice race should be completely optional to the player, and that, in addition to some frequent loading screens, does give me some minor Starfield PTSD. Now, after around a couple of hours of playing, after choosing a preset for the settings that worked fine for me, after learning some of the ins and outs of the game's mechanics and style, my experience greatly improved, and this is one of the most fun racing simulators I have ever played. This won't be a Starfield situation where you need to play 12 plus hours for the game to be enjoyable. It's mostly dependent on how you choose to play, what settings you decide to go with, what settings you decide to enable and disable, and you may reach that point of amazement a lot quicker than I did, or it might take you a bit longer than it took me. It's just dependent on you and what works best for you. Now, before you think that is all, there are still some issues that we need to talk about, but also some positives. It wouldn't be a Forza game without the rewind feature, and I feel it can still be a bit inconsistent, even going back to my first Forza game, which was Forza Horizon 3. I feel by now we should be given the option to have a timeline of our rewind, so we know where in place we want to stop, rather than having the game either rewind just a couple of seconds or it rewinds a lot further than we want to go. And of course, you can always disable the rewind feature if you want a much more challenging experience or something comparable to Gran Turismo. But just like my experience with Gran Turismo, if you disable the rewind in Forza, you might end up having to restart the race over and over again. And it's not a very fun thing to do when you're already on the last lap and you do that final screw up where you have to restart the whole race. It's not going to be fun. Now here is where things gets interesting. In Gran Turismo, you will always start at the back of the lineup, the back of the pack, and the race begins with the cars already in motion. So by the time you start the race, those who are at the front of the pack are already halfway through the first lap, giving them an unfair advantage. Now in Forza Motorsport, everyone starts at the lineup. They are all, parked there. They're not in movement. Once the light turns green, everyone goes together. There are some races where you will be in movement, but you're not going to have that unfair advantage like it is in Gran Turismo. Now here is something that Forza offers that Gran Turismo doesn't, and in my opinion is one of the smartest decisions I have ever seen a racing game make in the history of me playing racing games. Based on your performance with different races and events, you can choose where in the lineup you want to start the race, whether you choose to go at the front of the pack or the end of the pack. Now, this is a bit of a risk-reward system, as the further back you choose to start, the more credits you will earn from completing the race. I never really cared for a risk-reward system, but I greatly enjoyed it here, especially after playing racing games for years and years. I'm finally given the option to start at the beginning, the front of the pack, rather than being forced to always start at the end and have the AI get an unfair advantage. And that's pretty awesome here. Now, one important rule that I did forget is just because you know how to play one racing sim does not mean you will know exactly how to correctly play the other. You will get cars that handle perfectly and amazing, such as the pretty badass Toyota Supra, and you will get those that handles like shit, such as the ugly block of cheddar cheese sack of shit Mustang that I started with. And going back to that wasted potential of the car PG system, I would either, assumingly, I would either have the option to stick with my Mustang for as long as I'm allowed to, because that's what they implied, and then use all the experience points and upgrades to improve my car's performance, my handling, or I will take my Toyota Supra and make it far better than it already was. But the game is a bit of a learning curve, and it is about learning how each car performs compared to others. Like I said, you will get those cars that perform good, and you will get those cars that don't perform very well. Now, I also felt that there were some inconsistencies with the game, but for some of those things, I did learn that I was the problem mostly. Again, it's a learning curve, and we will get into it. I'm going to start with shifting gears because, as I said earlier, I do play my game with manual transmission and clutch. It made no sense that shifting down can happen instantly when I press the corresponding buttons, but when I want to shift up and go faster, it could take up to 3 or more seconds for my car to do so, and then my car will also freak out and kind of stutter trying to shift gears. I then learned the reason for that was I had to hold the clutch button about a second longer and actually shift my car to the next gear, fully before I let go of the clutch. By learning that, it did make my shifting much more accurate. It did allow me to have much better performance and gameplay, and that's something that I had to learn. Now, there is a penalty system that occurs when you crash into other vehicles or when you drive off-road, and you can choose to completely disable these warnings or only use like a half measure of the warnings, or go full simulator and enable these warnings to its entirety. And I used the halfway settings, and I felt it was a bit inconsistent. I would use the grass to cut a turn or smash into a bunch of opposing cars and receive no penalties. But if I drive on the rigid sideline for about 2 seconds or an opposing racer taps my car, I am then penalized on my lap time. And before I get into the importance of the lap time, I do not know if these warnings and penalties are more integrated with the full simulation, if they are randomized, or if it's smartly based on how much of an advantage or disadvantage you will have during those penalties for the race. Now, the penalization that you get for your lap time will at times hurt your position at the end of the race. For example, I could finish the race in first place, but if I had enough penalties that were a significant amount of time, about 2.5 seconds or more, it will then push my finish position to either second or further back, depending on those penalties. So it kind of made your position a bit more important in terms of how you race, getting, clean racing, not crashing into a lot of drivers, not driving off road too frequently. But it definitely becomes an issue when it does feel a bit inconsistent and the AI racers are almost completely brain dead. Now, this is something I have never seen or experienced within Gran Turismo. If I finish a race in first, I come in first place. I do understand why they did it here this way, but it's still bullshit in my opinion. Now, Forza Motorsport is one of the best looking games I have played this year and played in a while. However, the visuals, just like the warnings and the penalties, can be a bit inconsistent. You will see amazing looking vehicles, ray tracing, skyboxes. You can see your driver's arms reflection in the windshield of your car, but simultaneously, you could drive past some amazing looking trees and some flat, slightly poor textured rocks and cliffs surrounding the track. Now, racing in the daytime can provide some amazing sunlight, amazing visuals. It'll look amazing on the track, but it also makes it damn near impossible to see the damn brake turn assist arrows on the track, forcing you to miss it, crash or drive off road, having to rewind and try again and again. Now, the sound design is also a little bit of a mixed bag because the cars sound amazing. The engines, the gear shifting, the tires, whether it's, dragging from a hard braking or turning, it all sounds great within the vehicles. But there's no music that plays during the races, and it wasn't a major issue. I do use the Xbox wireless headset that also has Bluetooth for my phone, so I can use my Apple Music while I play, but I was always forced to adjust the audio of both the music and the game frequently so I can hear, the music a bit louder or the game a bit louder, and it kind of took me out of the game a bit too often, which I didn't really like. But the game does also feel a bit more alive compared to Gran Turismo. You do have some narration, you do have a voice companion, with lack of a better term, a coach essentially, who will talk to you, letting you know how many laps you have left, how many seconds of penalty you have, and the character models will also walk and move. You'll see character models in the pit before a race, walking, or they'll, come up to each other and do like a fist bump. Right before the race starts, when all the cars are in the starting position, they're all lined up. You'll see the racers next to their car. So the game does feel a bit more alive than GT. Now, I only played a little bit of the online mode, and despite some long loading and waiting for players to join, it was a pretty cool experience. The race did have a time limit of when it will start, and it also had a qualifier that you had to complete, but doing so will indicate where in the starting grid you will start at, and that's just based on your performance and your lap time during the qualifier, and that made sense, and I felt like it was a pretty good mechanic. Aside from that, I didn't do too much online, but I probably will do more online races as I play the game more, and I'll probably do a separate review just for the online mode. Now, I also have to emphasize that I have watched tons and tons of reviews for this game, and I feel that the majority of issues gamers are having with this game, such as bugs, glitches, crashes, etc., I want to say they're all PC players. I have not experienced anything like what I saw or heard in these reviews, on my experience, and I also haven't seen many reviewers or any reviewers talk about these issues occurring on the Xbox version of the game. Does that mean those issues don't exist on Xbox? No, I can't say for sure whether or not they do, but I also know that PC ports have been pretty shitty lately, and I personally don't understand why people still play games on PC, but that's my personal opinion and maybe a hot take. And the game apparently has issues with the steering wheel and pedal setup. I don't use that personally, but there's tons and tons of videos out there that will explain the issues with the game properly. Connecting to a steering wheel setup, properly calibrating the steering wheel for you. But as I said, there's a lot of videos out there. Probably they'll tweak it with an update or something going forward. I also saw a video talking about how in the tutorial you do get a quote-unquote racing car, like an actual race car, but they are non-existent in the campaign mode. I'm assuming it is saved for either future DLC or for a free mode or an online mode, but to tease us that way and not put it in the campaign is kind of a bummer. But the campaign does have a decent amount of things you'll be doing in terms of how many events you have to compete in. Each section of the campaign will have roughly 5 or 6 different cups to compete in. Each cup will have roughly 4, 5, or 6 races that you have to race in. So you'll be here for a while. Granted, I only completed Forza Horizon 3 somewhere around the time Horizon 5 came out, and I haven't beaten any of the Forza games at all. So I don't think I'll be completing this game at all, or I certainly won't be completing it anytime soon. But to wrap this video up, this could be one amazing experience for you, but is it the best racing experience? I can't answer that for you. I can say it is for a fact not the worst racing experience that you'll have. And if you can figure out what works for you, what's best for you, what settings you want to stick with, what settings are better for your gameplay style, if you stick with the game and learn its ins and outs that's important, then you will have a really great fun time with this game. Now, I don't personally agree with the idea of we will fix it later. They're not losing any money because it's on Game Pass and they're just paying the Game Pass subscription so they can try it and then we'll fix it later. I do not agree with that at all. But to kind of contradict here, it is on Game Pass. It'll be a fun experience for a weekend if you're not really a racing sim person. If you are a racing sim guy like I am, or you're even an arcade racer who wants to try a racing sim, and you have an Xbox and not a PS5 and you couldn't play Gran Turismo, you have the option to play Forza. I cannot say whether or not Forza is better than Gran Turismo and whether or not Gran Turismo is better than Forza. They both have their strengths and weaknesses, and they both are pretty damn amazing racing simulators. My only next or final negative for this game is not a lot of options for tracks within the campaign mode from what I saw and heard, but the rumor is they will be adding more and more tracks throughout the next few weeks, months, couple years, whatever. So you're gonna get a lot here, and it's gonna be fun, and it's still a beautiful looking game. So that is my video. That's my review for Forza Motorsport. Let me know in the comments, are you playing on Xbox or PC? Are you experiencing all the major crashes and bugs and glitches that other people are experiencing? Are you having a great time with the game or a terrible time? Let me know in the comments. Let me know if you want to play online sometime. I wouldn't mind playing online with one of my subscribers. NFS Beast, I'm talking to you. I don't know if you have the game, but if you do, hit me up. Let's figure something out. I'm Anthony Olan, and I'll see you guys next time.